Hello, my name is Aaron. I work here at the Colony Palm Beach. Today I'll be making a French 75 in honor of Culture and Cocktails, the 16th season. What goes into this cocktail is any type of gin. Today we'll be using Hendrick's straight out of Scotland. You can use any type of champagne, Prosecco. Today we're using Italian Silk Bar. There's only two other ingredients. One is fresh lemon juice. The second is any type of simple syrup or sugar syrup. Now to start this cocktail, we'll fill up our glass with ice. We'll start with our gin, the only liquor. We'll use 2 ounces. Now on top of the 2 ounces of gin, we'll go for ½ ounce of lemon juice, ½ ounce of simple sugar, and then we'll start to shake. After you've poured all the contents of your shaker into the glass, we'll finally top off with your champagne.
Good evening and welcome to the 16th season of Culture and Cocktails. My name is Dave Lawrence. I'm the president and CEO of the Cultural Council for Palm Beach County. And on behalf of all of us, welcome. We're thrilled you're here. I'd like to start by thanking our sponsors this evening. First and foremost, the Roe Green Foundation and its founder, Roe Green, who also is a board member of the Cultural Council. Roe, thank you for your continued support. Scott Teach of Teach Wealth Management of Raymond James, Legends Radio, Palm Beach Daily News, and Public Relations by Schweikert. I'm so happy to be with all of you this evening virtually. I so wish we could all be in the same room celebrating the start of another great season of Culture and Cocktails, but COVID-19 had other plans for us. Even though we are presenting Culture and Cocktails virtually this evening, we are doing so safely. All of us here at the Cultural Council, presenters, technicians, sound engineers, and other council staff are wearing masks when not speaking, maintaining safe physical distancing, and keeping the hand sanitizer close by. If this is your first Culture and Cocktails, welcome. We are thrilled that you've joined us. If you're interested in learning more about the Cultural Council or becoming a member, visit our website, palmbeachculture.com. I'd like to share a few updates with you about the Council and what we've been up to this year. At the beginning of the year, we launched our new brand that included the tagline, Arts, Sciences, History, Community. It's more important than ever before. Our mission is to champion, engage, and grow the arts and cultural sector here in the Palm Beaches. We have a vibrant, innovative, and dare I say, world-class arts and cultural sector in Palm Beach County. I want to share with you a few interesting statistics about our healthy arts and cultural sector. The arts in Palm Beach County generate an astonishing $633 million in economic activity each and every year. The number includes 3.9 million visits to our cultural institutions, and the sector supports nearly 15,000 full-time jobs. And then March happened. Let's talk about the impact of COVID-19. The cultural sector sent out a survey to our cultural organizations to ascertain the impact. With over half of the cultural organizations responding, here are the results. The sector endured a staggering $48.3 million in economic losses. This includes $26.2 million in earned revenue lost, with an additional anticipated earned revenue loss of $16.6 million through the end of the year. The figure also includes more than $5.4 million lost in contributed income for the same time period. Attendance has drastically dropped, with a loss of 888,000 visitors since March, with more than 1,600 events postponed or canceled. The number also includes 593 full and part-time furloughs and layoffs. So although the losses have been staggering, our sector is resilient and is already bouncing back. But it is going to take all of us to get the sector back on its feet. So how are we making that happen? Let's talk about Mosaic. Mosaic is an acronym for Month of Shows, Art, Ideas, and Culture. The Cultural Council commissioned Palm Beach County artist Bruce Helander to create this great collage that is part of our Mosaic marketing campaign. Mosaic includes discounts and offers to encourage a safe return to cultural activities throughout the Palm Beaches. And it's part of the county's cultural tourism plan to get our tourism engine back on track. More information about Mosaic can be found at mosaic.com. pbc.com. Here are some of the other ways that the Cultural Council has been working to support the sector and promote a quick and safe recovery. Our work isn't done, but here are some of the ways that we've been leading the recovery efforts. We created a COVID-19 resource page for our cultural organizations with information, resources, links, and funding opportunities to help them recover. We created the Palm Beach County Artist Relief Fund, providing over 100 grants to artists who had had events canceled or postponed due to the pandemic. We hosted special webinars for arts administrators throughout the county through our Institute for Cultural Advancement. Recently, we've created the Palm Beach County Cultural Resiliency Fund, which will provide direct support to cultural organizations on the road to recovery. And most recently, through the Restart PBC campaign that included lighting all of our cultural institutions throughout Palm Beach County green to signify that green means go, and many of our cultural organizations are ready to welcome guests back safely. We've also pivoted our programming at our headquarters in Lake Worth Beach, including presenting our inaugural Summer Performing Arts Series virtually, hosting virtual exhibition openings this summer. All of this is to say that our cultural organizations need your support as well. Give when you can and attend events as soon as you feel comfortable doing so. Our organizations are working hard to create a safe and clean environment for you to reconnect and restart with the arts. Finally, here's an opportunity for you to come to the Cultural Council this winter. Our newest exhibition is up, Reflections. It's a beautiful exhibition exploring light and shadow and reflection, exquisitely curated by our Artist Services Coordinator, Jessica Ransom. The exhibit features work by 19 Palm Beach County artists. The exhibition is currently open to members only on Thursdays and Fridays each week. We'll open the building beginning December 1st so that everyone can enjoy this exhibition. For all the details, be sure to visit our website, palmbeachculture.com. One final thing, the Muse Awards that were originally scheduled for April of 2020 have been rescheduled for January 14th. It will be a virtual presentation like no other. Please plan on joining us. You can find more information on our website. Okay, you've heard enough from me. It is my pleasure to introduce Lynn Kalber, a celebrated journalist here in Palm Beach County. She is the food editor and columnist for Boca Magazine. Raised in Boca Raton, she spent more than 26 years at the Palm Beach Post, where she edited feature and food articles, edited the food section, and wrote about wine as part of the Swirl Girls. Lynn is also known as Mrs. Eyman. So grab a cocktail and enjoy what I know will be a fascinating conversation. Lynn.
Thank you, Dave. First, we want to give an enormous thank you to the Cultural Council for Palm Beach County for hosting tonight's Culture and Cocktails chat. As you can see, they put on a classy event, and we hope we're classy enough to measure up to it. And a big thank you to all of you wonderful people out there in the dark. Classic film fans are smart, fun, and brilliant, if we say so ourselves. Tonight, my partner in crime is a New York Times bestselling author, a classic film historian, a professor, and a bon vivant. I'm a bit biased, though, because I've been married to him for 34 years. That's why we aren't social distancing. Scott Eyman is the author of 15 books, including the 2014 New York Times bestseller, John Wayne, The Life and Legend, and 2 other New York Times bestsellers with veteran actor Robert Wagner. His latest book, Cary Grant, A Brilliant Disguise, was published in October. Among his other books are Hank and Jim, The 50-Year Friendship of Henry Fonda and Jimmy Stewart, Empire of Dreams, The Epic Life of Cecil B. DeMille, Lion of Hollywood, The Life and Legend of Louis B. Mayer, Print the Legend, The Life and Times of John Ford, Ernst Lubitsch, Laughter in Paradise, and The Speed of Sound, Hollywood and the Talkie Revolution. Scott was the 2014 recipient of the National Board of Review William K. Everson Award for Film History for his body of work. His journalism and criticism work made him a Pulitzer Prize finalist. He's won multiple writing awards for his biographies, feature writing, film, and literary criticism. A little known fact, Scott also won a regional Emmy Award for TV comedy writing. He's an adjunct professor of film history at the University of Miami and is a frequent guest for Turner Classic Movies, programming, both on the film, on the channel, and on screen. By the way, he'll be introducing some Cary Grant movies on November 29th this year. He has lectured extensively around the world, done the commentary tracks for many DVDs, and currently writes book reviews for the Wall Street Journal. He's the former literary and art critic for the Palm Beach Post, previously wrote for the Fort Lauderdale Sun-Sentinel, and was entertainment editor for the Miami News. Plus, he's been the answer twice for Jeopardy questions. Okay, I'm exhausted reading that. Let's call it a night and go drink some cocktails. Oh, but wait, there's more. Right now, you're seeing a photo of the cover of one of Scott's book. What was your first showbiz bio, and why did you write it?
Mary Pickford, about Mary Pickford. Aren't you glad I knew that?
I'm glad you knew that one.
She hasn't given me any of the
First
questions.
one down.
So
No, he doesn't know anything.
I'm flying blind here.
Yeah.
Why did I write it? Well, I thought if I stayed in journalism without raising the bar, I'd be an alcoholic in 4 or 5 years. So I needed to do something to challenge myself. And I basically, I knew I wanted to write about silent films because that was my entry drug to old movies. So I just made a short list of people who had worked in silent films that I thought A, deserved a good book, and B, that I might conceivably, with blind amount of luck, be able to get published. And Pickford was one of 5 or 6 other people on the list. And I thought, well, there were more people alive who knew Mary Pickford at this point. We're talking about 1980 now, 81, than anybody else. So I thought I'd do Mary Pickford. And I did a proposal, and my agent couldn't sell it to save her life. But she kept at it, and finally she sold it after I was about halfway finished with the book. I just forged ahead with the book. And she finally sold it to a guy named Donald I. Fine, who was famous in the publishing industry for being incredibly cheap, number one, and for discovering Elmore Leonard, number two. And he told me that he bought the book for short money because the first movie he ever saw in his life was Mary Pickford's Sparrows in 1926. So it was Kismet. And the book was successful, oddly enough, and earned out in about 5 weeks, 6 weeks. And I was off and running.
I brought another book with us that is a little known book, but it's one of yours. Do you want to tell people about this?
That's a little thing I did before I moved into trade publishing. It's a collection of interviews with cameramen. William Clothier, Carl Struess, Linwood Dunn, special effects cameraman at RKO, who worked on King Kong, things like that. Very esoteric kind of stuff.
But really interesting things. I'm going to ask you to just tell us a short story about James Wong Howe. Is that what's his name?
Which one?
The one about the beach and the people on the beach.
My first trip to California, I'd never been there before, and I was broke, of course. So I took a cab to James Wong Howe's house, which was up on Kings Road, up above Sunset Strip. And we had a wonderful time. He introduced me to his wife, Sonora Babb, who was a novelist.
And what did he shoot?
Almost everything. He started working for Cecil B. DeMille in 1921 or 2, and worked through, shot Paul Newman's movies, HUD, Ombre. His last picture was Barbra Streisand, Funny Lady, the sequel of Funny Girl. That was his last thing he did before he died. And he was just a delightful little Oriental gnome. And at the end of the interview, I asked him to call me a cab. And he said, "You don't have a car?" I said, "No, I don't have a car. I have never been to California before." He said, "You've never been to California before?" He said, "You've never seen the Pacific Ocean?" And I said, "No, I haven't." And I had no plans because taking a cab to the Pacific Ocean would have been extremely expensive and busted my budget. So he said, "Well, you're going to see the Pacific Ocean. I'll pick you up at your hotel tomorrow." So at 10 in the morning, he picked me up in his Rolls Royce, and he was driving, and we drove down the Coast Highway drove down Sunset to the Coast Highway, and he took me to the Santa Monica Pier, where they happened to be shooting an episode of Columbo with Peter Falk. And we watched, and he said, "Oh, that's Harry." Harry was the DP, the photographer who was working on the episode. He said, "I worked with Harry." And there was a break in the shoot, and Harry Wilde looked over. His name was Harry Wilde. He looked over and said, "Jimmy." And the whole crew came to a standstill, and everybody said, "That's James Wong Howe." And Jimmy was retired at this point, and a legend in the business because he was the only Chinese American cameraman in Hollywood. at a time when it was hard enough to get in the union, but he got into the movies before there were unions. So he was grandfathered in, you might say. So the whole thing came to a stop, and everybody came over, the crew, the grips, the director, the cameraman, to spend time with James Wong Howe, because he'd been retired for a number of years at that point. It was not in good health. And everybody was just stunned to see him on a film location, you know? So, and I was just sort of standing there thinking, well, this is what it's like to be with a legend.
One of your first tastes of being with
My
a
very
legend.
first, my very first.
Okay, but not your last.
No.
And we'll get to that later. Here, you're widely respected as a Hollywood historian and have appeared frequently as an expert source in documentaries. But for many years, you were a book editor and art critic for the Post here in town.
Mhm.
How did you make the transition from newspaper writer to full-time biographer? What was it like trying to write two different kinds of things at the same time?
It was productive. It wasn't hard at all. It was stretching my muscles. So I wasn't just limited to one kind of thing. As I used to explain to people, journalism is my wife, but books are my mistress.
Oh, okay.
And they understood perfectly.
Yeah, okay. Me too. Uh-huh. Okay. Well, you've written best-selling books about John Wayne, John Ford, Cecil B. DeMille, Louis B. Mayer, and co-wrote 3 books with Robert Wagner. Out of all of these, who stands out the most and why?
Well, working with RJ was a blast, because he goes back to, he started working in the movie industry in 1948, and he's still working at the age of 90. So it was, that's getting as close to being in touch with old Hollywood as it's possible to get in the 21st century. And he's a delightful man to begin with. It's just, you know, he walks into a restaurant and it's like Charlton Heston parting the Red Sea. Everybody knows him and wants to have a picture taken with him and all that. So it's fun.
Plus, he's married to Jill St. John.
And he's
so
married
that
to Jill
doesn't hurt
St. John,
either.
or as she's better known, Tiffany Case, and you know, Diamonds Are Forever.
But Diamonds Are Forever, girl,
Right.
the Bond girl.
But a biography is a different breed of cat, and it can be frustrating and maddening, or it can be surprisingly smooth. The book that I've come to regard as my favorite is the DeMille book, simply because the book I wanted to write matched up with the book I actually wrote without having to take in a lot of fabric around the edges. It just seemed to fall together, because I've been thinking about him for 30, 40 years at that point. And it was just an ambition of mine to write the definitive life of DeMille, because I thought he was a fascinating man and a great director in the silent period. And I love to write about that period. And he saved everything. Generally, if you're a historian, you have to find workarounds for stuff that you just can't find. You know, so you have to intuit about what somebody was thinking or saying or doing at a given point. But DeMille kept all of his doodles. Everything was there. So it was just a question of figuring out which file it wanted to be in and looking for it, and there it was. So I didn't have to say on the one hand this, on the other hand that. It was nailed down.
Yeah.
So it was a very productive book to write for me, satisfying book to write for me.
Speaking of archives, where is your archive?
Brigham Young University, Harold B. Lee Library, which is where DeMille's archives are too.
Yeah.
It's for the same reason they asked.
For all of you researchers out there. We can go to the next photo is, and we're going to Cary Grant now, is this one.
Oh, him.
This is Archie Leach. Archie Leach, I call it Archie Leach, A Brilliant Disguise. The name of the book is Cary Grant, A Brilliant Disguise. What was the disguise and what was he hiding from?
I don't think he was hiding from anything. He was rather open about it. His central conundrum was the fact that he was born lower middle class in Bristol, England, in a very compromised family situation. His father was an alcoholic pants presser, and his mother was emotionally damaged and was institutionalized when he was 11 years old. And his father told him that his mother had died. So he lived the next 20 odd years thinking she was dead. He didn't find out she was alive until he was already working in Paramount Pictures in the middle 30s. Cary Grant was a construct that Archie Leach devised in order to not be Archie Leach anymore. And he was very open about that. He worked Archie Leach into as inside jokes in a number of his pictures. He was as amused by the fact that he was born Archie Leach as anybody could be. And Cary Grant was a performance. It was a character that he incrementally put together over a period of years until by the late 30s it was essentially all there, and could be adapted to swashbucklers like Gunga Din or romantic comedies like Bringing Up Baby, slapstick like Arsenic and Old Lace or His Girl Friday, or dramas even like None But the Lonely Heart or Penny Serenade. But people assume that actors are basically what their persona is. And in Cary Grant's case, there was a large gap between the man and the persona.
When going back to researching, tell us about your trip to Bristol. We're going to be seeing, the viewers are going to be seeing the picture of his house.
Yes, yes. Well, I was lucky. We have wonderful friends on Palm Beach, Peter and Ann Heap, Sir Peter and Ann Heap. And Peter grew up in Bristol. So I told him I was thinking of working on a book on Cary Grant, Bristol's most famous son. And he said, well, I'll take you there. I'll show you around. And he did. And Peter was an ambassador in Her Majesty's service. And to watch Peter working was astonishing. It was like watching Cary Grant work, because he's so smooth. And he would walk up to the place where Cary Grant went to middle school, for instance, and say, well, my friend and I have come a very long way to Bristol to see the place where Cary Grant went to school. Would you let us come in and see the classrooms where Archie Leach learned to read and write? And please come in. I wouldn't have had the nerve to approach people like that. I would have written letters and they would have ignored the letters. And then I would have made phone calls and emails and the whole rigmarole. No, Peter just walked up and introduced himself as Sir Peter Heap from Bristol. And they just took him back into their bosom. So it was like going to Westminster Abbey with the Queen. You just had an instant entree all over Bristol.
It was a great trip. And I remember saying to Peter, I said, people just let you in. He said, it's what I do. Which for an ambassador, of course it was. This is another picture that we're showing now. You ran into a friend there. Yeah.
That's the statue of Cary Grant in Bristol. He's carrying a script for To Catch a Thief under his arm. You can't see it in the picture.
Really?
Yeah, it's To Catch a Thief. And he's caught in mid-stride, looking like he can't wait to get to the set, which was not actually his attitude generally. He tended to go to the set dreading what he was going to have to do because he was always very anxious and nervous about performing as Cary Grant, but they emphasized the positive in that shot, because when people see the carrot,
It's a good statue.
it's a very good statue.
Really nice
It's a
statue.
very good statue.
Down in the middle of
The business district.
Right. So he left Bristol and went to America.
He got kicked out of school because he wanted to get kicked out of school because he wanted to get out of Bristol. And he knew he was cutting school constantly. His diary that he kept when he was 14 years old basically doesn't mention his father except for one or two passing references. Nothing about his mother, who he thought was dead at that point. And basically he's just cutting school to go to the movies and to go to the music hall, vaudeville. And he mentions the acts he saw and if he likes them or not, and he made friends with such and such in this act. And he was a stage-struck kid. And later that year, he got himself kicked out of middle school well, it doesn't matter. But he got himself kicked out and he apprenticed with a well-known acrobatic troupe called the Bob Pender Troupe, which was his entree into show business. And if you think about it, Cary Grant's greatness as a comedian and his skills as a performer essentially all spring from his control of his body and the way he uses his body, but against another actor, against the drift of a scene, something to pep up a scene. He was a remarkable athlete all his life. He was 6'2". I don't think he ever weighed more than 180. Maintained his weight rigorously. And so when he's sprinting across that cornfield in North by Northwest with the crop dusting plane after him, it's a beautiful thing to watch. And he's in his middle 50s at that point. And he's running like, Jim Brown breaking away from the Green Bay Packers.
True. So when he went to this country, how long did he act under Archie Leach's name?
Until he went to work
We're
at Paramount Pictures in 1932.
seeing that.
He was Archie Leach. He was Archie Leach in vaudeville, in English vaudeville, in American vaudeville. He was Archie Leach when he was working for the Schubert Organization on Broadway and on tour in musical comedies. And he was Archie Leach when he worked with Fay Wray in a play in 1931 that closed in about 30 performances. And from there, he went to Hollywood and changed his name to Cary Grant.
And he got the name from.
Cary came from the show he was doing with Fay Wray. His character name was Cary Lockwood. And he liked Cary. And he picked Grant from a standard list that Paramount had of surnames. So it was Cary from the play he'd done with Fay Wray, and Grant from just a general list of Anglo-Saxon
They
things.
had just a list, like pick one from column A. And one.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
Mhm.
Because you didn't want ethnic names in that period,
Right.
because it was thought to be a turnoff for the audience if your name was Archie Leach or Goldberg or
Mm.
whatever it was. They wanted they wanted to banish any hint of ethnicity.
Some performers are actors, and some are movie stars. What was he? Are real actors or a movie star?
He was
And
both.
He was both.
He was both. He didn't start off as an actor. He started off as a movie star because he's gorgeous and he stands there and he doesn't really project much. He seems inhibited in his early movies, actually. But that's in 1932. By 36, 37, he's starting to put it together. That you have to project something in a movie in the same way that you have to project something on stage. You have to project a character, an attitude, as it were. And that's what he starts to do when he's working with Katharine Hepburn and Sylvia Scarlett, and Hepburn again and Bringing Up Baby, and Irene Dunn. And he took actresses were really important to him. They freed him up in some way. With an actress he liked that he resonated to, he was free. It gave him a sense of, I can do anything. I can hit the ball anywhere and she'll hit it back. And he's much better with skilled actors on the other end than he is with an okay actor who's not particularly interesting. He tends to respond in kind to who he's working with.
Well, the good ones do, I think, right?
Some more than others.
Mm.
Some more than others. But he's particularly attuned to the other performer he's working with.
I'm going to toss out some. Oh, well, before that, this picture that goes with the next question, I'm going to show you this picture.
Mhm.
What was going on with this picture?
He went through a period in his early days at Paramount, 32, 33, 34. He had an obsession with his neck. He thought his neck was thick and ugly. So whenever possible, he would have a scarf around his neck or his collar turned up high, anything to disguise his neck. He got over it later.
As if any part of Cary Grant, hello, is a,
But that has nothing to do with it.
No,
that
I
has
know.
nothing to do with it. He was a nervous actor.
Yeah.
He was not a natural actor. He was a natural performer, but he was not a natural actor, if you get my drift.
Yeah.
And he would look at himself with a very critical eye, a harshly critical eye, and say, well, this isn't right. This isn't right. And of course, you or I look at him, and audiences for 80 years have looked at him and said, perfection.
oh yeah,
Perfection. But he looked at himself and he saw things that needed to be fixed
Yeah.
or hidden. And his neck was one of the things he focused on for a number of years until he just learned to live with his evidently obese neck. And his neck, there's nothing wrong with his neck.
no,
His neck's fine.
Yes.
But there was something that he had to find something wrong
right,
somewhere.
right, to correct.
Yeah.
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 Okay, if I give you some names of some of his co-stars, if there are anecdotes or tidbits that come to mind, can you let us know?
Mhm.
Mae West.
He owed her a lot. She cast him in 2 of her pictures. They were both extremely successful. They were his first entree to a mass audience in the movies. He didn't really like her. He thought she was coarse and common. Not. She would say things like, I ain't ready. When they called her to come, I ain't ready. She'd yell out, and he thought that was vulgar.
But she thought he.
She said, well, I'm old enough that I actually interviewed Mae West. That's how old I am, as you well know. And people are always, it's like, you knew Elizabeth I? Really? Yes, I did interview Mae West in her cocooned pearl apartment at the Ravenswood our apartment house with the mirror over her
You can
bed.
tell us about
The mirror over her bed, as she put it, so I can see how I'm doing. And there was a nude statue of her in the hallway as you came in from
modest, very
from
modest.
the, and it was a lovely statue. She was about 4'11". She was tiny, maybe 5 feet tall, and she had platform shoes that had like this much a sole to give her some height, and a huge wig that gave her about another 6 inches. So she didn't look like a dwarf, but she was a tiny woman. But she had the most beautiful skin. There were no wrinkles, no age spots, and she was 78 or 80 when I interviewed her. She was old, and there was no
Not that
sign.
old.
There was
Not that old.
That's old. There was no sign of the usual things that you can't hide, like age spots and or hands. Because she'd never spent a day in the sun in her life.
Yeah. So how did she get?
She told me she couldn't find, which her story was, as she expressed it to me. She said, I was looking for a leading man and I couldn't find one. And he turned the corner and came around and said hello. And she said hello. And she said, he was the best looking thing I ever saw in my life. If he can talk, I'll take him. And of course, he could talk very well. So she worked with him twice. And in Mae West's mind, Mae West was the single most important star in the history of motion pictures, and also the single most important star in the history of Cary Grant, because she gave him a leg up. And she was important. She was important. But he was always a little not thrilled with her because, she was a kind of, he thought, vulgar, because she was from Brooklyn and didn't disguise it. She was from Brooklyn.
My mother was from Brooklyn.
Well,
FYI.
and also small. Also small.
Yeah, true.
But he would take, when she made her comeback in the late 40s, early 50s as a nightclub act, he took Leslie Caron and Caron's date to see her, and he said, "It doesn't matter whether you like her or not. She's one of a kind. You need to experience her."
Wow.
And they were, of course, blown away by her.
I would say that about Cary Grant.
Yeah.
Frankly. Katharine Hepburn.
Oh, he loved her because she was fearless. She'd do anything. She was not a physical comedian, but she trusted him. So he taught her how to do falls and tumble and do a full somersault. And she'd never done it in her life. And he just admired her willingness to do stuff like that and trust him. At one point, in Bringing Up Baby, she's on his shoulders, and he's carrying her on his shoulders.
Yeah.
And then she does a tumble and roll. And he said, imagine a movie star who would do that. Because you could hurt yourself. You really could. You could break something doing that stunt. He said, but she was absolutely fearless. He thought the world of her. And they were friends all their lives.
Alfred Hitchcock.
Hitch was probably his favorite director because everything was planned out to perfection. You never had to worry about Hitchcock, about working in a Hitchcock film, because he'd worked everything out on paper, That said, and they both were working class Englishmen who put all that behind them as far as they could, and became aristocrats in America for Americans.
Reinvented themselves.
And completely reinvented themselves, and they each knew each other. They each knew a lot about each other. Each of them understood the other in a way that very few people understood either Grant or Hitchcock. Late in his career, Hitchcock was giving a speech at Oxford. And he said the thing about, and he was telling the kids, he was telling the class, he said, the thing about actors is you cannot fool the public. He said, Grace Kelly came off as likable, and she, in fact, was a likable person. He said, and Tippi Hedren came across as cold, and in fact, she was not a likable person. He said, there is only one actor that I'm aware of who is so good at what they do that the public has no idea what they're really like. And somebody in the audience said, Cary Grant? And he said, exactly. Because he understood Grant and Grant's issues, and Grant understood Hitchcock and Hitchcock's issues, because they both came from the same spot, the same place. Hitchcock came from outside London and Grant came from Bristol, but they were both lower middle class kids from England.
Speaking of Grace Kelly.
Oh, he adored Grace Kelly. I think he was a little bit in love with her. actually.
Yeah, well, who wasn't? I mean,
But that was his favorite actress. And I mean, Grace Kelly's great, and his second favorite actress is Ingrid Bergman. But I don't think Grace Kelly was the best actress he ever worked with. She was just stunning,
mhm.
I mean, Bergman's a much deeper, more assured actress with a wider palette. She also had a much longer career, but he adored Bergman because she was so unpretentious. She would come to work in khakis with her hair tied back in a shoelace because it wasn't about, she didn't have any pretensions about being a star. It was about the work. She was a very
Yeah.
serious actress, and that's all she really cared about was the performance. Whereas so many people get tied up in the posing of show business and what's the
accoutrements.
showmanship of show business. And Bergman wasn't like that. So those were his two favorite actresses.
So who was his favorite co-star? Was it a woman or?
Well, it would have been Grace Kelly, and he loved Irene Dunne too. He loved actors, as he put it. He said it's like throwing a ball back and forth. He said, with some people, you throw the ball, and not only don't they throw it back, they don't even catch it, because they're thinking about their next line. They're thinking about their dinner. They're thinking about their date after they're finished shooting. They're not really in the scene. They're not concentrating. He said with people like Irene Dunne, with Kelly, with Bergman, they were really there with you. And you could throw something at them and they would respond in kind and in character. And he said, that's when it's fun.
Mhm.
That's when it's fun, when you get a sense of reciprocity and play in acting.
Yeah, it's real then.
It's real. It's real. Yeah.
As
You're
real-
not just reading
real as
lines.
acting can be.
The scene's alive in a way that it maybe wasn't necessarily alive on the page.
So we went to a festival, the Lone Pine Western Film Festival in Lone Pine, California, which is about 3.5 hours north of LA, way out past Death Valley up in the Sierras. It's beautiful, but kind of stark. Describe visiting the Gunga Din set there.
Oh, yeah. Gunga Din was shot at Lone Pine. The locations were all at Lone Pine, which stood in for the Hindu Kush. Yeah, stood in for the Hindu Kush. And because a number of pictures, whenever that was the go-to place if you're going to shoot a picture about the British Raj in India, you'd go to Lone Pine because it looked like northern India, basically. And a guy who devoted his life to Gunga Din basically took us on a tour of the locations for Gunga Din and the headquarters for the Thuggee cult, where he showed us where the building was built. And he said, as a matter of fact, when they tore it down a year or two after the film was made, they tore the set down because it was made out of wood and plaster, like most sets are. He said they threw everything in the river. He said, if you want, you can go pick out a piece of the temple of Kali, Temple of Kali. And I went over, and by God, he wasn't kidding. There were dozens of pieces of plaster from the Temple of Kali that were still in the riverbank from 80 years ago, from the production of Gunga Din. And then he took us to a rock. There's a sequence where they're moving an elephant across a rope bridge.
The picture that
You're
everybody's
right.
seeing right now.
And they get the sense of the moving it over a ravine with a mat shot. But actually, they're about 12 feet off the ground. But you can see the iron spike that was driven into the rock to hold the rope bridge for the scene is still there. So nothing changes in Lone Pine. The rocks are the rocks, but it's all still there. And if you know the film very well, you can see this was where the Temple of Kali was, right there. And this is where the parade ground was, right there, where they buried Gunga Din, and this is where they moved the elephant across the rope bridge. So
one of the best museums we've ever seen.
Oh, yeah.
It's just a
Great
spectacular museum. Oh my God.
Oh my God.
Who does the best impression of Cary Grant?
Oh, Robert Wagner. Robert Wagner can do about 35 seconds recreating an entire scene from Gunga Din, including the trumpeting of the elephant as they move the elephant across the rope bridge.
With movements.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, he's a wonderful man. Cary Grant said Robert Wagner did the best Cary Grant. And it's a virtuoso. It's a virtuoso piece of imitation. It really is.
It's true. The next picture, I'm going to ask you, what's the most embarrassing costume that Cary Grant ever had to wear, or the most embarrassing, like makeup or like
For instance.
oh, yeah, I'll show you what they're showing.
Okay.
No, not that one. Excuse me.
Oh, well, that's from I Was a Male War Bride.
Even just the title.
Yeah, it's a great title, where he has to masquerade as a woman for very complicated reasons, because he's married to Ann Sheridan, and they're trying to get across a border, and he can't. He's not supposed to be going across the border, so he has to play a whack, and he plays it. Now, generally, when actors are in drag in a movie, they camp it up, like say Jack Lemmon and Tony Curtis and Some Like It Hot, where you don't really believe they're women for a moment,
Right.
Because
Especially because they can't walk in
right,
high
because they
heels.
can't walk in high heels. And the thing about Grant is he doesn't try to camp it up. He's furious at having to be in character. The character is livid that he has to do something this demeaning in order to be with his wife. So he's glowering throughout the entire picture, and he wears this absurd Louise Brooks wig, a page boy wig, which is the most incongruous possible thing. If Cary Grant's going to be dressed in drag, he shouldn't wear a page boy wig, So it's very funny. It takes a long time to get there. He's only in drag for about 20, 25 minutes. And it takes about 60 or 70 minutes to get him there. And then if there's like 15 or 20 minutes after he's out of the drag. So it's kind of a comedy I call it a comedy procedural. We don't really care why he has to get in drag. We just want to see him get there.
Right. He did several. He put on a peignoir. And
well, in Bringing a Baby, he dresses, he plays a very kind of a fetching peignoir.
Yeah.
Because his clothes are being laundered and there's nothing else to put on. So he puts a peignoir on. He's very fetching.
He looks good and everything.
Yeah.
And he loved making the movie that we're going to show the picture of next time, Father Goose.
Yeah.
Because
he said it was one of the few times he played someone who was a lot like him, kind of misanthropic, self-absorbed. And when he wasn't working, he didn't dress up in a tux and look like Cary Grant. He'd go around in a bathrobe and
on set.
No, not on set, but at home.
Oh, okay.
At home, he didn't.
Okay.
He dressed very casually around the house in floppy slippers. He didn't. He was being Archie, you might say, rather than Cary.
Right.
And so in Father Goose, he can clearly see he's having a wonderful time playing a grump. A guy who's lived alone for 40 years and likes it that way. And here he is being harassed by an annoying school teacher and 6 pubescent girls, none of whom he wants to have anything to do with. So it's just a kind of a grumpy, misanthropic performance, and it's very funny. Better than the movie. The performance is actually better than the movie.
It's a fun movie. Our next picture is the debonair, Cary Grant. But he was also known for taking a lot of what drug?
LSD.
Like how many times?
Well over 100.
Lots.
Well over hundreds. He spent several years dropping acid, which he undertook because psychotherapy had failed him. And he had come to a point in his life where he didn't know what else to do. Because if you start out poor and without any leverage, you think naturally enough that if I can get money and if I get position and if I get leverage, my problems won't be there anymore. That you think your problems are a function of income and possessions. And you go through, and 30 years later, you wake up and you've got all those things and you still have the same problems. And his problem was basically the fact that he was Archie Leach and he was playing Cary Grant. He wasn't really Cary Grant. He was inside, he was still anxious, nervous Archie Leach. And he wanted to try to integrate these two personalities that had been warring inside him for decades. And psychotherapy hadn't worked and marriage hadn't worked. He was on his 3rd marriage by that time.
He was married how many times?
5.
5 times.
The 3rd marriage was getting shaky at that point, and he was frantic. He didn't know what else to do. So he tried LSD. It was a legal substance at that point, and according to him, it basically gave him a new life. It enabled him to see his hypocrisies, as he put it, and his hypocrisy. That was the word he used. It enabled him to get past his social pretensions. It enabled him to unify Archie with Cary, finally.
Wow.
And the thing of it was, the people that worked with him and knew him thought he was the same guy after acid as he was before acid. For him, in
Right.
his head,
Right.
it made a big difference,
That's the
even
point.
though it didn't necessarily affect his outward behavior.
That's the point of it. When he died in 1986, was he all Cary?
He got very close to Cary. Retirement made a big difference for him. He finally had more money than he could ever spend, which was important to him because he was one of those poor people who had been poor as a child and needed a lot of the insulation that amounts of money can give you, so he could feel secure. He didn't have to worry at all about working. And he had his daughter, finally. He had a daughter with Diane Cannon, his fourth wife, and he adored children. I talked to several children who worked with him over the years, and he was special with children. He would take time with them, because most movie stars, they don't really take time with a child actor, because child actors are cute, and they'll detract attention from you to them, you know?
Right.
And
Kids and animals, right?
Kids and
Never worked
animals.
with them.
And he didn't particularly like working with animals, but he did like working with kids. He would take time with them. He would give them hints about acting. He would explain a scene to them, how to best appear in the scene and possibly take attention away from him. He didn't care. He was really good with kids, both professional kids and non-professional kids.
Wasn't there one actor, little boy, he was really good with who talked with you? I can't remember.
Yeah, the little kid in a movie called Once Upon a Time. Yeah. They were doing a scene where the director wanted to play the scene on Grant. That was the kid where they say goodbye to each other. He said, no. This has to be a close-up on the boy. This has to be a close-up on the boy. He said, put my shoulder in there so they know I'm in the shot, but it has to be a close-up on the boy. He wouldn't let the director do what he wanted to do. And the director tried to talk him. I said, no, because Grant had that kind of leverage where he could tell a director, not Alfred Hitchcock, but he could tell second-level directors, what he wanted done with a scene. And he did. He didn't use that prerogative terribly often, but he was willing to in that case.
Did you ever meet him or his daughter?
I interviewed Jennifer. I never met Cary Grant. I saw him at the end of his life he was doing a series of one-night stands called A Conversation with Cary Grant. He would do one a month, for instance. And he would go into Schenectady or Pomona or Fort Lauderdale. That's where I saw him, in Fort Lauderdale. And basically they would there was a montage of his film clips for 6 or 7 minutes. He would come out, he would sit in a stool. There would be microphones in the audience, and he would simply take questions for 90 minutes. Whatever people asked him, he looked great. He had a full head of white hair, wore horn-rimmed black glasses, was in complete control and very relaxed. And you could see that Cary and Archie were unified, because while he would talk, he would present himself as Cary Grant, and he dressed like Cary Grant, beautiful tux. The conversation, what he actually said, once you got past who was your favorite movie star, who did you like to kiss, those kinds of questions that people ask, he would talk about that acting is a lot more than memorizing dialogue. You have to hit lines. You have to make sure the light is, you have to hit your mark so the light's on you. And he would talk about, I remember in Fort Lauderdale, he talked about the technical aspect of it, that if you have to mix a drink in a scene, for instance, you have to put ice cubes in, you have to pour the drink. And if you don't put the right ingredients in, someone's going to notice and write a letter, or a critic's going to notice and write a letter. So you actually have to be thinking while the dialogue is going about the ingredients of the drink. You have to make sure if you take a drink, sip from the drink, that the ice cubes don't bump against the glass and wipe out the dialogue. All these technical issues that no one really thinks about when you're watching a simple scene like a man mixing a drink and taking a sip. But he said but they were all technical issues. It wasn't emotional stuff. It wasn't like being real in a scene. It was a talk. He was talking about technique of acting, the technique of acting, getting a laugh, which is all timing and beats.
He's an amazing person. We've met a lot of amazing people over the years. And then this next photo is 2 people that you've talked about already.
RJ and Joe.
And this was at the launch of your first book with him.
Pieces of My Heart. Yeah.
pieces of my heart. And you brought, when you first met him, the first meeting you had with him was here. You both
Charlie's
brought,
Crab.
right,
Late
right.
lamented Charlie's
Yes,
Crab.
the former. You both brought photos to that
Well, I didn't know.
I know. Well, I made you take a photo.
I made
you
you
a
the
photo
door.
as you
I didn't know
the
the
door.
door.
But when you got there, what
When
did
you
you
got
both
there,
have photos
what
of?
did you-
He had a picture. He brought out a picture of his German Shepherd, who was named Larry after Olivier. He and Olivier had been friends since they did a production of Cat and Hot Tin Roof together in the 70s with Natalie Wood. And I pulled out a picture of my dog Cooper, my German Shepherd, silver and black German Shepherd, who was named after Gary Cooper. So we bonded over our mutual passion for German Shepherds.
What Cary Grant movie best describes our life together? I know my
Charade.
answer. Not my answer.
What was your answer? Bringing a baby? Who's the baby?
No, actually, baby was a leopard.
I can't give you anything but love. Baby.
Baby was a leopard?
A leopard.
Leopard in
Who
the
answers
movie.
who answers to that song. So
Right.
they have to keep singing the
That's
song.
how the leopard was trained. We have quite a few animals, so that was one of the reasons I was basing it on that. And we have a lot of good times too.
We do.
Thank you.
Like this, for
That's
instance.
right, like this. Again, we thank the Cultural Council for Palm Beach County. This has been a wonderful time, and we hope you've had a good time too. Thank you.
Thank you.
God, thank you so very much. What fascinating discussion. I think we all learned a lot tonight. Gary Schweikert could not be here tonight. He's one of the original co-founders of Culture and Cocktails. He wanted to welcome you all also to the start of our 16th season and our first ever virtual conversation. Despite all the limitations posed by the COVID pandemic, we are determined to present at least 4 fun and informative events this season. The first 3, including tonight, are happening online, but we still have hope that our annual musical finale in April will once again be live in person and at the Colony Hotel Palm Beach. The next Culture and Cocktails, also online, will be Monday, February 1st, and we're calling it Cultural Dynamos. It will be a delightful and hopefully insightful chat with 2 amazing artistic visionaries. Douglas C. Evans, the executive director of the Chamber Music Society of Palm Beach, who was formerly chief operating officer of Nederlander Worldwide Entertainment and a prolific producer of Broadway plays and musicals, and Marjorie Waldo, a nonprofit turnaround agent who is now the innovative president and CEO of the Arts Garage in Delray Beach, where she is busy producing shows and concerts and arts exhibitions that both connect and reflect her community through the transformative nature of the arts. These 2 cultural dynamos will be interviewed by me, and that is happening on February 1st. I hope that you'll join us. Thank you so very much for being here tonight. We can't wait to see you again, hopefully in person sooner rather than later. Stay safe and support the arts. Good night.